a lot of smaller credit unions and credit unions that have a pretty specific common bond. So, like, for instance, working at the GPO or being members of a specific church parish. Oftentimes, kind of in terms of making loan decisions, the kind of social knowledge, the reputation of people in the community is often a factor in that process. Is that something that you see here, or do you guys more rely on objective measures? How does that work?
Yeah, and that's a great question too. I find it to be a little bit of both. I believe that having members that are the volunteers that people know on those critical committees that they can talk to in the hallway. I mean, I think that's a huge part of what we do as credit unions. It's different than banks, and I think that part does allow for a member to be able to just pick up the phone or walking in the hallway and run into one of the members of the credit committee and just strike up a conversation. I'm okay with that. As a matter of fact, I encourage that because let's say if a loan was to go before the credit committee, I mean, they're sitting among their peers or before their peers, and I think that's a huge part of what we do as credit unions. Their peers are looking at them and able to render a decision. Certainly, on the lending side, the objective part has to be critical because that's where the professionals we understand how to underwrite. But I think that if there's something that we may miss, or if a member think that we didn't see it right, they have an opportunity to go before their peers.
So your mention of the credit committee. A lot of credit unions have moved to more using loan officers. Can you talk a little bit about sort of having been in the banking sector and in different credit unions, your sense of sort of the differences between using credit committee, using loan officers, or some hybrid of the two?
Yeah. That's an interesting area because certainly being at the bank, clearly underwriting was left with the professionals, and probably as it should be. I get that. However, in credit union world, I think there's value added when someone on a credit committee can look at it from a different angle and say, hey, by the way, let's look at this again. When I was at another credit union, I was totally we understood that the credit committee kind of had run its course, and at that point we made a decision, or a decision was made that committee had kind of run its course. Still, you had the appeal process, but in that instance, it would go directly to the board. Here at GPO, FCU, it works just the other way. We still have a credit committee. I know there are credit unions that have gone away from it, and I believe that they're for good reasons. I understand that. It still works for us here. The credit committee is very, very active. We are certainly we work in partnership with them. Clearly, once a loan decision is made, you're not going to have everyone that's pleased with that. We look at every opportunity to make a loan, and we think that by and large, the majority of the loans are made or denied here, and sometimes they never reach the credit committee. But if a member feels that they'd like to have an appeal, then that process is there for them.
And can you speak a little bit to the folks who kind of choose to serve in the role of a credit committee member? Like, who are the people who've kind of stepped up into that role, and what are your sense of like their motivations and things like that?
Yeah, for the most part, in credit unions that I've been a part of, normally you'll have board representation on that credit committee, but it's open to volunteers. Again, I can sit before my peer. Someone that's not looking just at they're looking at the underwriting guidelines, but they also hear my story, and I think that's critical. I can remember, Matt, if I may digress a little, I remember being at the bank, and there was an individual, and there were times that everything was just judged by credit scores. And you wanted to take as much subjectivity out of the loan process as possible. Sometimes I don't think you can take all of it out, but as much as possible. But when I got over to credit union world, and I remember as a loan officer, a member came in my office, and this particular member had been turned down. We had turned this member down, and the member sat there, and I just said, I want to hear your story. And when I heard the member's story, I got the opinion then that that member would pay that loan back before they eat. And I made the loan. So again, you want to have, you've got your objective criteria there. But whenever I'm approaching a lending decision, I want to hear the person's story.